7 hours later. I had some things I had to do, man. What is up? YouTube, how y'all doing there, man? It's supposed to be a marathon, but I got somebody to come over to work on my backyard to straighten some things out. Anyway, check this out, man. Diddy is gone. His ex-lawyer breaks down here they go, right here in my glasses. Testifies in court. Shocking revelation. Y'all know one of Diddy lawyers quit, basically. Some people say he got fired. That's the rumors going around. He stepped down. Things wasn't going his way. He didn't feel as though he can be a part of these lies, I'm assuming. Whatever that is. So y'all hit that subscribe button. We're going to get into this video right here and see what's really going down. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that bell. Let's check it out.
Have you ever stopped to think about the price of silence? What happens when the truths that everyone tries to bury finally come to light? When someone finally decides to break that silence. Today, we dive into the most shocking case that the legal world and the public could never have imagined. Diddy, the music mogul, the man who seemed untouchable, is now facing a situation that no one could have predicted. His former lawyer, the one who had been behind his deepest, darkest secrets, steps into the courtroom, breaks down in tears, and exposes something that could bring it all crumbling down. Could this be the end of Diddy as we know him? Or is there something even darker lurking beneath the surface? Imagine carrying a secret so heavy it slowly eats away at you. Now, imagine being the one who holds the power to reveal it all, but at the cost of your career, your safety, and your life. What's the price of truth? Today, we're going to uncover what happened when this lawyer decided to break their silence. Buckle up, because what you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about the powerful figures behind closed doors. And it all starts with a letter. The night had started like any other at the office, quiet, stale, and empty. It was the kind of place where time seemed to stand still. The hum of the old fluorescent lights above echoed in the stillness, and the faint smell of mildew lingered in the air, no matter how many times the carpets were vacuumed. The office wasn't glamorous, it was far from it, but it paid the bills. There were no high-profile cases, no drama, just routine paperwork, filing contracts and handling corporate matters that no one outside the courtroom cared about. But then, that night, something happened that would change everything. The lawyer, a junior paralegal at the time, was left alone in the office after everyone else had gone home. The lights were off, the doors were locked, and the phone was silent. It was in the stillness of those late hours that the discovery was made. A lone envelope, wedged in between files, caught his attention. It was an unmarked manila envelope, no client name, no date, just an anomaly. At first, he thought it was just another forgotten memo or legal document, something that had been misfiled. But as he pulled it out, something felt off. It was heavier than expected. The wax seal on the back, old school and hand-pressed, made his stomach twist. Something about it screamed danger. He cracked it open, expecting paperwork. Instead, a stack of lined paper slid out. The handwriting was jagged, messy. The words were frantic, as if written in a hurry. At the top of the first page, one line stood out, burned into his memory. This won't stay buried forever. The letter spoke of private meetings, unlogged and hidden away, discussions that took place behind closed doors, in hotel suites, away from the eyes of the law. The names were never explicit, but there was one that appeared again and again, Sean Combs. He didn't pay much attention to celebrities, but even he had heard of Diddy. The man who seemed untouchable, always in the headlines for something, lawsuits, trafficking, abuse allegations, racketeering. But what he read wasn't what he expected. It wasn't the dry, legal language he was used to. This was personal. This was terrifying. The writer spoke of violent threats whispered in hushed tones, the fear of being forced to sit across from people who were too afraid to speak out. There were descriptions of staff being paid off or worse, silenced. People who had tried to walk away, but never could. Files mysteriously disappearing before trial deadlines, payments funneled through shell companies, witnesses pressured into silence. There were no names, just enough to connect the dots if you knew how to look. But the scariest part? The final sentence. When the trial begins, you'll know where I'll be sitting. At first, the lawyer thought it was a joke. Maybe one of the interns had pulled a prank, but the more he thought about it, the more it didn't add up. This letter wasn't written by some careless office worker. It was written by someone who knew the players involved, someone who understood the cases and the stakes. The handwriting, messy and desperate, told a story of its own. This wasn't a hoax. The lawyer slid the letter back into the envelope, filed it away, and tried to get back to work. But something kept gnawing at him. Days went by, and the letter haunted him. He couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time he walked by the courthouse on his way to work, there was a heavy weight in the air, a feeling that something was shifting. He began to look at the old case files that had passed through the firm years ago. At first, it seemed innocent enough, routine NDAs and contract disputes. But then he began cross-referencing dates, names, and case numbers from the letter. Some things lined up too perfectly. Gaps in communication logs, mysteriously dropped claims, a junior associate who left under strange circumstances. His stomach sank further. The date for Diddy's federal trial was set, May 5th, just weeks away. Jury selection would begin soon. The case was already public knowledge, but something about this letter, this mysterious writer, felt like a warning. The writer had promised he would know where they'd be sitting when the trial began. But where would that be? That night, the lawyer tucked the letter away again, buried it under more paperwork. But deep down, he knew he couldn't just ignore it. Who had written this letter? Why was it left here? And what was really going to happen in that courtroom? He didn't know it yet, but the answer to those questions would change everything. Next time, we'll see how the case against Diddy begins to unravel, and how the weight of that letter continues to loom over everything. What lies beneath the surface is about to be exposed. Don't miss out on what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button and join our community, where secrets like these are uncovered, and the truth behind the headlines is revealed. Stay ahead of the story and be part of the journey as we expose what's hiding in the shadows.
Okay.
The air in the courtroom felt different that day. There was a palpable tension, the kind that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. You could feel it in the way people shifted in their seats, in the hushed whispers of spectators, the way even the press seemed on edge. Diddy's name had been circulating through tabloids and news outlets for months now. Allegations piled up, lawsuits mounted, but none of that compared to the feeling in the room today. This wasn't just about another trial. This was about a fall from grace that the world had been waiting to witness. The man who had once ruled over the music industry, who built an empire with his own hands, now appeared fragile and diminished. The courtroom was filled with reporters, cameras flashing, scribbling down notes, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Everyone wanted to see what the next chapter of Diddy's life would look like. What could possibly be worse than the storm that had already engulfed him? And then, there he was. Diddy stepped into the courtroom, but it wasn't the same man that everyone had come to know. There were no loud entrances, no charm oozing from every step he took. Instead, he walked with his head down, his shoulders slumped. The swagger that used to define him was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. The lights above him cast harsh shadows on his face, making him look older, worn out. His once perfectly groomed hair was now a coarse gray, his face gaunt, marked with deep lines. The audience stared, but no one dared to make a sound. The man who used to fill stadiums, who smiled wide for the cameras, was no longer there. The version of Diddy that everyone remembered, the one they worshipped from afar, seemed to have vanished. Now, there was only the shell of a man, beaten down by the weight of his own choices, his own secrets. But what had brought him to this point? As he shuffled to his seat, the room grew eerily quiet. No gasps, no murmurs, just an almost suffocating stillness. His gaze didn't meet anyone's. Not the reporters, not the jurors, not even the judge. He stared ahead, fixated on some distant thought, as if his mind was elsewhere, far away from the courtroom. The reality of what had happened to him, the enormity of the accusations, seemed to have hit him harder than anyone could have imagined. Diddy didn't speak. He didn't make eye contact with anyone. It was almost as if he had already mentally checked out of the world around him. His lawyer's hands were tense, shuffling through papers, but Diddy barely moved. He wore the same tan prison jumpsuit, creased at the elbows, hanging awkwardly on his frame as though it didn't belong to him. The luxurious suits, the gold chains, the extravagant lifestyle, all of that was a distant memory. As the trial began, the media section shifted in their seats, eager to capture every moment, every detail. They were waiting for Diddy to speak, for him to show a flicker of the man they used to know. But nothing came. Instead, there was just a cold, quiet presence that filled the room. There was a woman in the back of the courtroom, seated among the spectators. She was trying to stay inconspicuous, but her presence was anything but unnoticed. Her eyes, locked on Diddy, didn't move. Who was she? Why did she look so focused on him? Everyone in the room felt that there was something more to her than met the eye, as if she knew things that no one else did. The defense team occasionally exchanged uneasy glances, their faces betraying a hint of fear. Was she a part of his past? Or was she someone who had been watching, waiting for the right moment to make her move? But what was her connection to Diddy? And why was she watching him so intently? Across the room, Diddy's defense lawyers sat stiffly, not daring to make a single move that could disrupt the fragile atmosphere in the courtroom. They scribbled notes, their faces blank, but you could see the tension in their shoulders. Something wasn't right. The way they looked at Diddy, the way they avoided meeting anyone's gaze, this wasn't the same confident legal team that had once stood by him during his rise to fame. The prosecution, on the other hand, sat with calculated composure. They didn't need to raise their voices to get attention. Their silence, their focused eyes, said everything. They knew that the public was already on their side. But more than that, they knew that Diddy's reputation, his empire, had already taken a significant hit. This was no longer just a legal case. This was the unraveling of an empire built on secrets, lies, and manipulation. As the judge started reading off the charges, you could feel the weight of the moment. The air seemed to thicken, as if the walls of the courtroom were closing in. Every word felt like a nail in the coffin of Diddy's career, his life as he once knew it. The judge's voice echoed through the room, but no one seemed to hear it anymore. Everyone was too busy watching Diddy's every move. The defense tried to push back, but there was something different in the way they reacted. It wasn't the usual back and forth you would expect in a high-profile case. Instead, there was an unease in the way they fought for Diddy, as if they, too, had begun to question whether there was any hope left for their client. Diddy remained motionless. The cold indifference that radiated from him seemed to fill the space between the walls, pushing everyone in the room to feel the gravity of the situation. But just when it seemed like the room couldn't get any more tense, something happened that would change everything. The ex-lawyer, the one who had left Diddy's side, was about to take the stand. The one person who could either make or break the case. Her testimony would reveal what had been buried beneath layers of legal jargon and carefully crafted statements. Her words would soon be heard, and when they were, the courtroom would never be the same. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into the secrets that lurk beneath the surface. Drop a like if you're ready to uncover more hidden truths, and share this video with anyone who needs to see what's really going on behind the headlines. And don't forget to check the pinned comment. There's a special gift waiting for you that will unlock even deeper insights into the mysteries we're revealing. Let me know what you think. Let's keep this conversation going. The tension in the courtroom reached a breaking point as the ex-lawyer slowly approached the witness stand. The room, once filled with whispers, fell silent. Everyone was waiting for her to speak. The woman who had once stood at Diddy's side was now here to testify against him, and her words would carry the weight of everything that had been hidden for so long. She walked up with a quiet resolve, her face a mask of controlled fear, as though the truth she was about to reveal was something she had spent years trying to forget. When she sat down, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. People leaned forward in their seats, eyes fixed on her, waiting for her to break her silence. As she adjusted herself in the chair, her hands visibly shook, a subtle sign of the pressure she was under. The courtroom was filled with anticipation, and yet, there was something almost suffocating about the moment. What could she possibly have to say that would change everything? The prosecution stood, and with a steady voice, began to ask her about her time working with Diddy. The questions were simple at first, routine stuff, the kind of things anyone would expect in a case like this. But as the questioning continued, it became clear that something much darker was lurking beneath the surface. Her voice, at first quiet and trembling, began to gain strength as she recounted her experiences. She spoke of meetings that never made it into official records, of conversations that happened behind closed doors. She spoke of a world of manipulation, coercion, and threats, things that should have never been part of any legal proceedings. The more she spoke, the clearer it became that Diddy's world was built on lies, secrets, and power that no one dared to challenge. But it wasn't just the details of these meetings that shocked everyone. It was the weight of her words, the way she described what she had witnessed. The quiet intimidation, the silencing of voices, the people who had been paid to stay quiet, or worse, who had disappeared entirely. Every word she spoke painted a picture of a world far darker than anyone had imagined. And then it happened. The moment that no one expected. When asked why she had left Diddy's legal team, her voice cracked, and she whispered, barely audible, "I couldn't continue representing him. Not after what I saw." The courtroom held its breath. It was as if time itself had stopped. For a brief moment, everything went still. Her admission sent a shockwave through the room. The realization that this wasn't just about a lawyer leaving a firm, it was about a breaking point. She had seen something, experienced something that had shattered her ability to stand by Diddy. But what was it? What had she witnessed that was so horrible, so disturbing, that it caused her to walk away from her career, from everything she had built? She paused for a moment, her hands tightening around the edges of the witness stand, her knuckles white from the pressure. It was clear that this wasn't something she was ready to fully unpack. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable, and it was at that moment that the truth began to sink in for everyone in the room. She wasn't just a lawyer testifying. She was a person who had been scarred by what she had seen, someone who had been trapped in a system of corruption that was far beyond anything she had ever imagined. The prosecution pressed her further, asking her to go into more detail. What exactly had happened behind the scenes? What had she seen that had made her so certain that Diddy wasn't the person the world thought he was? But despite the pressure, she held back. Her response was deliberate, measured. She wouldn't say everything, not yet. The fear of repercussions was still too fresh in her mind, and her voice faltered as she tried to balance between her duty to the court and the knowledge that speaking too much could destroy her life. People who tried to walk away, she said softly, her voice trembling. They were silenced. Their careers ruined. Their lives turned upside down. They disappeared. Every word she spoke added weight to the dark picture that was beginning to form. It wasn't just about Diddy. It was about a system of control, of power that reached far beyond anything anyone had known. The defense team shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging quick glances. They knew something that the public didn't. The truth was far worse than anyone could have imagined. The lawyer's testimony was a ticking time bomb, and the more she spoke, the more the case against Diddy seemed to unravel. But this wasn't just about Diddy's empire falling apart. No, this was about something deeper, something that could affect everyone involved. The ex-lawyer's words painted a picture of a hidden world, one that most people couldn't even begin to comprehend. A world where power was not just about money, but about control. A world where those who dared to speak out were forced into silence, either by threat or by the overwhelming power of those in charge. Her words echoed in the courtroom, growing louder and heavier with each passing moment. And yet, even as she spoke, there was one thing that no one could quite grasp. What was the true cost of all this? What had she given up by speaking out? What would she lose in the end? The more she testified, the more the audience became captivated by her story. This wasn't just about a celebrity's downfall. It was about the uncovering of a hidden truth. The truth that had been buried beneath years of manipulation and power. As her testimony came to an end, the weight of her words hung in the air like a thick fog, leaving everyone in the room with one question. What was the next move? What would happen when Diddy's empire finally crumbled, and the people who had been silenced began to speak? And just when you thought the story couldn't get any more intense, a new face entered the picture, and it became clear that the secrets were far from over. What was this new player's role in the story? And how would they impact everything that was about to unfold? The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath, the weight of what had just been revealed hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. The ex-lawyer's words had already done their damage, but something about the way she left the stand left everyone questioning how much more there was to come. She had cracked the surface, but there was so much more hiding beneath it. Diddy's defense team remained stone-faced, as if they were trying to keep the situation under control, but even they couldn't hide the tension radiating from their every movement. It was clear, their carefully constructed world was starting to crumble. And the worst part? They weren't sure if they could stop it. The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place, and what they had tried so hard to bury was coming to light. As the witness testimony came to an end, the courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs. The ex-lawyer had walked away from the stand, but her testimony wasn't the only thing leaving everyone uneasy. It was her presence, the fear, the exhaustion, the look in her eyes. It wasn't just about what she had revealed. It was about the weight of the truth, and the fear of the consequences of speaking it out loud. But who else was out there? The prosecution didn't miss a beat. They knew exactly what needed to come next. Their eyes turned to the defense team, waiting for them to react, to challenge what had been said. But there was something in the way the defense looked at Diddy, something unsettling that made everyone in the room shift uncomfortably. They were waiting for him to react, to stand up and speak for himself, but he didn't. His gaze was distant, fixed on the far wall of the courtroom, as if he was somewhere else entirely. It was as if the man who had once controlled everything, who had been the face of power and success, had already checked out. His silence was deafening, and it left the room feeling even colder than it had before. What had happened to the man who once ruled the entertainment world with confidence and charisma? And then, just when it seemed like Diddy's silence would consume the entire courtroom, the unexpected happened. A new person entered the picture. She wasn't a witness, at least not in the traditional sense, but her presence was felt immediately. She was introduced as a former associate of the firm that had handled Diddy's legal matters. She had worked in the background, on cases that the public had never heard of. But the moment she stood up and began speaking, the room shifted again. There was something about her, something that made everyone sit up and pay attention. She wasn't just here to testify. She was here to connect the dots. Her voice was steady, though there was a flicker of hesitation as she took the stand. She wasn't shaking like the ex-lawyer had been, but her words carried a weight, a kind of quiet resolve that made it clear she wasn't afraid to speak out. She had been a part of Diddy's world, but now she was ready to reveal the things she had witnessed, the things she had been complicit in, without fully understanding the consequences at the time. As she began to recount her experience, a chilling realization began to form in the minds of everyone in the room. This wasn't just about a celebrity on trial. This was about a system of power and control that reached far beyond any individual. The web of influence that Diddy had weaved wasn't just about money. It was about silencing anyone who threatened to speak out. And this woman, standing at the witness stand, had witnessed it firsthand. She spoke of conversations held in the shadows, about people who had been promised rewards for their silence, and others who had been threatened with their livelihoods or even their safety. As she spoke, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The intimidation, the fear, the manipulation. And in that moment, it became clear that Diddy's empire wasn't built on music or business. It was built on silence. But there was more. There always seemed to be more. As she began to explain how things had worked behind the scenes, her words grew heavier, more personal. She wasn't just describing what she had seen, she was describing what had been done to her. The coercion, the manipulation, the power Diddy had wielded over people, making them feel as though they had no choice but to comply. She wasn't just a witness, she was a victim of the same system. Her testimony was different from the ex-lawyers. It wasn't about legal documents or meetings in backrooms. This was about the emotional toll. This was about the fear that had driven people to stay silent, even when they knew the truth could destroy everything. As the prosecutor asked her more questions, it became clear that she wasn't just speaking for herself anymore. She was speaking for everyone who had been caught in Diddy's web, everyone who had been forced to keep quiet, everyone who had been a part of something that went against everything they believed in. And now, they all wanted out. But even as she spoke, there was a shadow in the room, one that had been growing ever since the trial began. The defense team's discomfort was palpable, and it wasn't just because of the testimony. No, it was because they knew something else was coming. Something even worse than what had already been revealed. This woman wasn't just here to talk about what she had seen. She was here to expose the very heart of the machine that had kept Diddy on top for so long. She was the one who could finally bring everything crashing down. But who was behind the scenes pulling the strings? As her testimony continued, one question echoed in everyone's mind. Who else was involved in this system of control? And what would happen once the full truth was revealed? The story wasn't over. It had only just begun. What do you think will happen next? Let me know in the comments. Are there more secrets yet to be uncovered? As the days went by, the atmosphere in the courtroom became even more charged. The revelations that had already been made were enough to shock anyone. But there was a lingering feeling. Something was coming. The pieces were starting to align, and the more people spoke, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about a man's fall from grace. This was about an entire system that needed to be dismantled. The witness who had just taken the stand, the woman who had seen it all, had left the courtroom shaken but resolute. She was only one part of the puzzle, but her testimony had already peeled back layers of deception. Yet there were still more questions to answer, more hidden corners to explore. What else did Diddy's empire hide? What other figures were connected to this web of control and manipulation? It was during a break in the proceedings that a new figure appeared, a man who was not on anyone's radar, someone whose name had never come up before. His arrival was quiet, almost unnoticed, but to those in the know, his presence sent a chill through the room. Who was this man, and what role did he play in all of this? The defense team was quick to recognize him, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. They knew what he meant. He was someone whose testimony could change the entire trajectory of the trial. This was no ordinary witness. He had been a shadow in the background, someone who had stayed out of the spotlight for years. But now, he was here, ready to add another layer to the unfolding drama. The man was introduced as a former high-ranking associate who had worked directly under Diddy. His position had been crucial. He had been involved in everything. Every decision, every deal, every piece of the puzzle. This wasn't just someone who had observed the empire from the outside. No, this man had been deeply embedded in the very heart of Diddy's operations. He knew things no one else did. And now, he was ready to share it all. When the prosecution called him to the stand, the room grew tense. His eyes were calm, but there was an unsettling weight in his presence. This wasn't someone who seemed like they were about to crack under pressure. This was a man who had spent years in the shadows, and he wasn't afraid to speak now. His testimony started slowly, almost methodical. He didn't jump into accusations or wild claims. Instead, he began by explaining his role, how he had been involved in the inner workings of Diddy's empire. He spoke about the structure, the network that had been built to protect Diddy and his interests. But as the questions continued, it became clear that what he was describing wasn't just about business. It was about control, manipulation, and secrecy. He described the way Diddy's team had silenced dissent, how they had used legal threats, intimidation, and even blackmail to keep people in line. The most chilling part of his story was the sheer scale of it. What had started as a few isolated incidents of manipulation had quickly become a well-oiled machine, one that was designed to ensure that no one, not even the most powerful people in the industry, could challenge Diddy. And as the witness spoke, it was clear that the more he revealed, the less Diddy seemed to be the mastermind behind it all. Who had been pulling the strings from behind the scenes? Who had set the plan in motion? And what did they hope to gain from it? As the man continued his testimony, it became increasingly clear that Diddy's fall was not just the result of his own actions. There were other players involved, people who had been working in the shadows, manipulating events, and using their power to maintain control. The more the witness spoke, the more it seemed that this trial wasn't just about one person's criminal activities. It was about an entire system that had been built on lies and deception. The room was hanging on every word. No one could deny the gravity of what was being revealed. This wasn't just a case of a celebrity who had made bad choices. It was a case of an entire network of individuals who had used their power to manipulate, silence, and control. The more they learned, the more they realized that Diddy's empire wasn't just about wealth and fame. It was about a far darker system that kept everything running smoothly by keeping the truth hidden. The defense team, though still trying to hold their ground, looked visibly shaken. They weren't prepared for this. The man they had once trusted was now unraveling everything they had worked so hard to protect. The pieces were starting to fit together in a way that no one had expected. As the day wore on, it became clear that this trial was no longer just about the charges against Diddy. It was about exposing the deeper corruption that had allowed this empire to flourish for so long. The witness had given them a glimpse behind the curtain, but the full story was still out there. Who else was involved in this intricate web of control? The courtroom felt electric as the prosecution prepared to question the next witness. But just when you thought it couldn't get any more intense, another bombshell dropped. The defense was about to reveal something no one had expected, something that would throw the entire case into chaos. But what could they possibly have to say that would shift the balance of power in this trial? Let me know what you think in the comments below. What are your theories on what's going to happen next? Who else is behind all of this? As the proceedings continued, the tension in the courtroom felt almost suffocating. Every word spoken seemed to add another layer of intrigue to the case, drawing everyone deeper into the mystery. Just when it seemed like the trial had reached its peak, something unexpected happened, something that would shake the very foundation of what everyone thought they knew about this entire saga. The defense had remained quiet throughout the testimony, their strategy clearly to hold their cards close. But now, as the latest witness finished speaking, the defense team's demeanor shifted. They weren't just reacting to the accusations anymore. They were about to make a move that would change the direction of the trial entirely. The man who had been sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom, watching the testimony unfold, finally stood up. His presence was immediately felt. He wasn't a witness, but the moment he stepped forward, all eyes turned to him. He wasn't someone you could ignore. He had an air of authority about him, as though he carried the weight of knowledge that could undo everything that had been said up until this point. He was introduced as a former confidant of Diddy's, someone who had been close to the mogul, but had distanced himself from the scene long ago. He wasn't here as a friend or as an ally. No, he was here to expose something far darker than anyone had expected. This wasn't just a man telling stories from the past. He was about to deliver a bombshell that would unravel everything. As he began speaking, it was clear that he knew Diddy in ways no one else could claim to. He wasn't just part of the inner circle, he had been a part of the strategy, a key player in the machinations that kept Diddy at the top. His words weren't just accusations, they were detailed accounts of how Diddy had carefully built his empire, step by step, using influence, intimidation, and secrecy to secure his place at the top. But what really set this man apart from the others was the insight he had into the very core of the operation. He had seen it all from the inside, and now he was ready to expose the truth. He spoke about the methods that had been employed to keep people quiet, how Diddy's team had worked tirelessly to control the narrative and silence anyone who dared speak out. The threats weren't just vague warnings, they were real, tangible actions that had destroyed people's careers and lives. But even more chilling was the revelation that the threats had extended far beyond the legal team. There was a deeper force at play, a force that had made Diddy untouchable for so long. This was no longer just a case about a celebrity on trial. It was a case about the lengths people would go to in order to maintain power. This witness wasn't just exposing Diddy, he was exposing the very system that had allowed him to operate unchecked for so long. The network that had been created to protect him wasn't just about money, it was about control, manipulation, and fear. The room was on edge as the witness continued. The defense, who had remained stoic up until now, suddenly appeared uncomfortable. They had been counting on a different narrative, one where Diddy could be portrayed as a victim, a man caught in a situation beyond his control. But now, with the truth beginning to come out, it was clear that the narrative was shifting. Diddy wasn't the victim here. He was the orchestrator of a system that had exploited everyone around him. The witness went on to explain how Diddy had used his position to manipulate the media, to create a persona that was larger than life. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a master of optics, someone who knew how to control public perception. The world saw him as a mogul, a genius in the entertainment industry. But behind the scenes, he was a different person altogether. He was the puppet master, pulling the strings from behind the curtain, controlling everyone around him. The testimony was enough to send shockwaves through the courtroom. It wasn't just about a few bad decisions anymore. It was about a deliberate, calculated strategy to maintain control. This was about power on a level few people could understand. And the deeper the witness dug, the more it became clear that there was more at stake here than anyone had imagined. Who else was involved in this web of deception? And how far did it reach? Just when it seemed like the trial couldn't get any more intense, a surprise revelation came to light, one that no one saw coming. The witness, having dropped his bombshell, sat back in his chair, his face betraying no emotion. But the effect of his words lingered in the air, hanging over the courtroom like a heavy fog. But the question everyone was asking wasn't just about Diddy, it was about what came next. What was the fallout going to be? Who else would step forward to reveal the full scope of the empire Diddy had built? And what would happen when the world finally saw the truth? Let me know in the comments below. What do you think of this new twist in the case? What's really going on behind the scenes? As the trial reached its final moments, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation, but it wasn't just about the verdict anymore. The revelations had gone far beyond the courtroom walls. What had started as a legal battle had now become something much larger, a window into the world of power, control, and the lengths to which people would go to protect their empires. What began as a story of one man's fall from grace had turned into a story of systemic manipulation, deception, and secrecy. But even as the truth began to unfold, one question lingered in the air. Who else was involved? The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle wasn't complete. Diddy may have been the face of the empire, but what about those who helped build it? Who were the others working behind the scenes, pulling strings, and ensuring that the truth stayed hidden? The courtroom may have been silent, but the world outside was anything but. The stories, the whispers, and the rumors all started to align. The more people spoke, the more the full extent of the corruption was revealed. But as the trial ended, it was clear that this wasn't the end of the story, it was only the beginning. What happens when the full truth finally comes to light? As the last words were spoken, the crowd filtered out of the courtroom, but the impact of everything that had been revealed would resonate for years to come. Diddy, the powerful mogul, may have been brought down in a way no one expected, but what about the system that allowed him to thrive for so long? What happens to the people who, until now, had managed to stay out of the spotlight, hiding in the shadows while others took the fall? The shocking truth of this case wasn't just about the guilty party, it was about the deeper layers of deception that the public wasn't ready to see. It was about the power structures that go beyond just one man's actions, about the networks and the people who protect these truths for as long as possible. We may never truly know the full scope of the empire Diddy built, or the damage that was caused by those working behind the scenes. But one thing is certain, this case will echo through the corridors of power for years to come. The reality of what happened in that courtroom left more questions than answers. It opened the door to a world of secrets, a world that remains hidden from most of us. Who else has been manipulated? What other dark truths are out there waiting to be uncovered? These questions linger, begging to be answered, and as the story unfolds, we will be right here, ready to keep peeling back the layers. If you found yourself hooked on this case, the shocking details, and the web of manipulation that we've uncovered, you'll want to stay tuned for more. We've got plenty of untold stories, buried truths, and mysteries that are just waiting to be revealed. This trial may be over, but the secrets are far from finished. Before you go, don't forget to hit the super thanks button if you enjoyed this deep dive. Your support helps keep these stories coming and lets us dig even deeper into the world of hidden truths. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications, because we've got much more to reveal. This is only the tip of the iceberg. There are many more stories like this one, just waiting to come to light. So what's next? What other shocking revelations are we about to uncover? Stick around, because this journey is far from over. The secrets are out there, and we're just getting started. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think is the next big reveal? And don't forget to check out the other videos on the screen for even more hidden stories you won't believe.
Man, when this trial starts, it's only one person I'm hoping that they call to the stand. One person. And she's not a celebrity. The makeup artist. She already been on a couple of YouTube channels, or she talked to somebody, was interviewed basically, and she stated that she was there to cover up Cassie scars when they was abused and stuff. So her job was to put the makeup on to cover up the scars and stuff. And the guy asked her, well, why didn't you say anything? She said, I tried to be a friend. I was her friend, you know. So that's the only person I really want to hear what they have to say. Also, check this out, man. Also, like the making of the band, there are all kinds of producer, cameramen, all kinds of people that Diddy can't bow off and manipulate everybody. there's a police officer, female police officer, then filed some court papers, or her name is in the court papers, with her stating that Diddy made me take a bribe and put somebody in jail, and he set that whole case up. The guy is in jail for something he didn't do, and he keep filing all these cases. He done filed over 200 cases trying to get his freedom out. And she wrote in her case that she was one of the people that helped frame this guy that's in jail. This rabbit hole is getting deep, baby. When I say it's deep, it's past deep. So when this trial start, Uncle Mike gonna be right there front row and center, man. So y'all tell me what y'all think about that one. I'm gonna get on up out of here. Hey, y'all take it light, take it slow. Tell them Uncle Mike told you so. Peace out.